Hello everyone, back tuning into Gazwell Vids on your Christmas Day. So we're going to be doing a historic video at Gazwell Vids for Christmas Day 2018. We're going to be looking at the winter of 1968-1969. Now, the last historic video that we did at Gazwell Vids back in the August Bank Holiday Monday, was for the year of 1868-1869. So now we've skipped on a century, and we're looking at the period of 1968-1969. So we're going to start off looking at the autumn, because that sets the pattern for what happens in the winter. This does become a really cold winter, actually. 1968-1969 eventually becomes a very, very cold winter indeed. It takes a while to do it, but eventually it does become really very cold and very snowy as well. There's a white Christmas as well for many of us, so I'll talk you through how that played out. And if we have time, we'll have a look at the summer as well, because the summer of 1969 was one of the warmest summers of the 1960s. It's a terrible decade for summers, but 1969 did actually have quite a decent summer. So sit back, relax, enjoy it, and I'll talk you through 1968 to 1969 for your Christmas Day viewing pleasure. Big thank you for tuning in to Gazwell Vids on your Christmas Day. I'm always overwhelmed that people would like to share their Christmas Day with me and with Gazwell Vids. So huge thank you to all of you for tuning in on this Christmas Day. Of course, I'm aware that some people aren't going to be able to watch this on Christmas Day, and if not, this video will be placed within the historic section at Gazwell Vids, so you'll be able to come back, watch it on demand whenever you would like to do that. Now, before we get on with the video, as always, I'm going to say a couple of shout-outs. I'm going to say a big thank you to Trevor Harley. A lot of the information, or most of the information that you hear in this video, has come from Trevor Harley. So, again, you can find a link to Trevor Harley's personal website on the links page at Gazwell Vids and in the description at YouTube. So, it's a huge resource of information. It has information for the weather going right the way back into the mists of time, centuries and centuries ago. So a big thank you to Trevor Harley. Also a big thank you to weathercentral.d for allowing us to use their historic archive of charts. So I'm just like the narrator in this. I'm pretty much the smallest cog in this particular wheel. It really is the information from Trevor Harley put together with the historic archive of charts at weathercentral.d that makes the historic videos what they are. So again, a big thank you to Weather Central and a big thank you to Trevor Harley. And I think that's pretty much everything I'm going to say. So just once again to say thank you so much for tuning in on your Christmas Day, and I hope you enjoy the video. Right, so we're going to start off having a look at the autumn of 1968. So the summer of 1968 was rather an unsettled summer, and it was rather mixed, and that carried on into September as well. So this is how the Thursday of September 1968 looks, with low pressure out to the west of the country, and we're bringing in this westerly wind across the UK. Now, we go through to the 4th and then on to the 10th, and we start to build a ridge up to the east of us as there's high pressure starting to get going over Scandinavia. Low pressure is out in the middle of the Atlantic, and we're drawing up this pretty warm but quite unstable southerly wind. Despite that, bringing up this warm southerly wind, it's not a particularly warm month for September 1968. It only has a CET of 13.9, which isn't all that far from the long-term average. But as we move in towards the 12th, we see the low pressure beginning to take over. It's starting to become a little bit more unstable out in the Atlantic as this high pressure is shifting a long way north. That's a northern blocking feature that's setting up there between Greenland and Scandinavia. Maybe that's even the first hints of what's going to happen in the winter. It's probably a little bit early for that, but it is quite unusual to see northern blocking in September. Now, as we run into the middle part of September, we get a very interesting weather event taking place down in the south via this area of low pressure. It's a very unstable area of low pressure that we have sitting to the south of the country on the 14th. And as we go through to the 15th, that intensifies and pushes northwards, and this brings a widespread and severe flooding event to southeastern part of the country following heavy and prolonged rain through the middle part of September 1968. So on Saturday the 14th and Sunday the 15th, we get widely 75 millimetres of rain falling. That's 3 inches of rain falling across the south and the southeast. Much of Surrey, Kent and London record 150 millimetres, 150 millimetres, with the record from Tilbury at 201.4 millimetres. 57 millimetres of rain falls in 42 minutes at Purley. As a result, much of Surrey ended up underwater. East Moseley in Surrey was particularly badly affected with flooding on the River Mole. The effects of the Surrey flood were devastating. A thunderstorm moved across London into Essex during the afternoon of the 14th of September, and as it faded, a new one developed over Kent, Essex and southeastern parts of London. That thunderstorm lasted 15 hours. There was a 15-hour thunderstorm from the 14th to the 15th of September 1968. And it must have been really quite incredible, to say the least. I've never experienced a thunderstorm lasting that long. And that's the reason that those rainfall totals really clocked up. And there was that widespread flooding down in the southeast part of the country via this really nasty area of low pressure. Now, move to the 16th. That low pressure begins to push away to our east. We start to pull in this pretty cold northeasterly wind there. So that would have felt pretty bracing, I think, again, with high pressure out to the north and to the western part of the country as well. Get rid of that low pressure by the 18th, when high pressure is building back in, but not for long. More low pressure is heading in from the Atlantic. This is a very unsettled September that we have here in 1968. That's the 23rd, for example, looking really quite autumnal, and more wet and windy weather coming in from the Atlantic on the 27th to close out the month on an unsettled note on the 30th. There is an idea that cooler, wetter Septembers, particularly wetter Septembers, tend to favour colder winters, and this is one of those classic examples where we do have a very wet September, very unsettled September, and it was followed by a cold winter. More on that later. This is how we go into October of 1968. Now, October 1968 is a warm month. It has a central England temperature of 12.5, but unbelievably, it will be beaten by the October the following year. The October of 1969 was actually warmer, but this was a pretty warm October, and it was one of the warmest of the 20th century, although it was often dull with frequent southwesterly winds. And you'll see the reason it was quite warm, because we have high pressure consistently sitting to our south, bringing up these southerly to southwesterly winds. So here we are on the 5th of October, for example, with high pressure reaching across the west of Europe. It is tying back to this northern blocking feature still over Greenland and Iceland, but now its orientation is bringing up pretty warm air from the south. There's the upper air temperatures with the 10 Celsius ice firm pushing across England and Wales. That's pretty decent for the 5th of October. That would be taking temperatures probably to around 20 degrees, 68 in Fahrenheit. Now, look at that on the 7th. That's very unusual for October. A Greenland high there at 1,030 millibars, and a cold northerly plunge moving down into Scandinavia. Again, this could just be hints of what's going to happen in the winter. Could just be the atmosphere. I think sometimes the atmosphere does give you a bit of a teaser before you're going to have a cold winter, and sometimes the atmosphere does let you know that something isn't quite right. And that's what we see there on the 7th of October, a big Greenland blocking feature and a cold northerly plunge in Scandinavia. Though for us, we're still generally quite warm with the air actually coming up from the south. Then to the 10th of October, it turns wet and windy as that deep area of low pressure moves in from off the Atlantic. That takes into a very unsettled middle part of the month. But it's not long before those southerly winds are back. This is the 21st of October, a classic St. Martin's summer chart, which is when you tend to get a final burst of warm southerly winds around the 21st 22nd of October. That's a classic example of the submarine summer, with again high pressure through the middle of Europe, low pressure out to northwest, and bringing up these very mild, if not quite warm, southerly winds. We move through to the end of October 1968. It's turning increasingly unsettled now as we start to head towards the final stages of the month. Notice again heights rising close to Greenland, and now we're trying to pull down a very cold northerly wind to the north of us out of the Arctic. But again, we remain with these southerly to southwesterlies, which are quite mild, but also bringing rain. That's how we look on the final day of October. Halloween 1968 is just trying to bring down this cold north to northeast wind, but actually it's this low pressure out of the Atlantic, but still maintaining those milder southerly to southwesterlies. There's a weather front that's through this central part of the country that would have been bringing a lot of heavy rain. In fact, Trevor Hardy says that there was 159 millimetres of rain in Trolley-Moor on the 31st of this day, last day of October, and it's Northern Ireland's highest daily rainfall total. So a very, very active weather front indeed there on the last day of October 1968. Reason being, of course, there's a big temperature contrast. It's very warm, the air just to our south. 15 Celsius isotherm is remarkably through the Bay of Biscay. The 10 Celsius isotherm is in the English Channel. But just to the north of the country, we've got cold air poised. And obviously, this temperature gradient along this 5 Celsius isotherm just here would be fueling some copious amounts of rain. So that low pressure moves through the country into the start of November, and we pull down this cold northerly wind. This is like the first cold northerly shot of this what will be very long and cold winter. So this is quite an interesting day. On the 3rd of November 1968, we pushed the milder air, the warmer air, and the rain out to the east. We've still got the ridge building across Greenland and Iceland, and in between the two, we're squeezing down this cold north to northeasterly wind. There's the upper air temperature showing the warmth is being pushed off into Central Europe. 15 Celsius isotherm is in the Baltic Sea, which is very remarkable for the 3rd of November. So that warm air being pushed off into Central Europe. These cold northerly winds are bringing the 5 Celsius isotherm down across the UK. And then by bonfire night of 1968, we're building this ridge through the country, which is a cold ridge that will be bringing frost and fog. Despite that, this month, November 1968, actually just has average temperatures. It has a CET of 6.5, which isn't too far from average at all. And that's all we have to work on in terms of my notes from Trevor Hardy. So we'll see how it unfolds. And what happens is that we get this ridge on the 6th building across Scandinavia and bringing in this easterly wind. Now, this is a particularly cold easterly wind, but it is interesting that even in early November, we are building up high pressure over Scandinavia. So the weather patterns through this autumn are very different to what you expect in a normal autumn, although bear in mind this is the 1960s, which is infamous for being a very cold decade. So it has lots of cold winters, it has really cold and miserable summers, very wet, miserable summers. And all the other seasons, spring and autumn, they tend to be pretty cold at times as well through the 1960s. It's just a generally cold decade with subdued temperatures. So for the era, I suppose this wouldn't have been that abnormal. But where we are now, in 2018, we start off with a Greenland high, and then we get a Scandinavian high within a week. That would be very notable to see that in November. So anyway, we're on the 7th of November. We're bringing in this easterly wind. And it's not an overly cold wind, but it's certainly a proper east. You can follow the isobars back, but wind is originating across to Russia. So there's the upper air temperatures on the 8th of November, for example, and we've got the -5 isotherm there into the UK. So it's a pretty chilly easterly, but not as cold as it would be later on in the winter, probably bringing a lot of grey, dank and gloomy type weather. That's the 12th of November, and we're having to go moving the Atlantic in again against this ridge of high pressure. That effort fails, and the high pressure continues to be sitting there over Scandinavia. Now we're into kind of like southeasterly, so again, not overly cold, but certainly unusual and abnormal weather patterns, and the atmosphere is giving a heads up here that something isn't right, something isn't is not working as it should be, because this should be a zonal time of year, typically, with southwesterly winds dominating. So the Atlas is just giving you a little heads up that something's not right, and that's going to become more apparent, of course, as we get to the winter. Again, this is the 17th of November 1968. We still have that high pressure over Scandinavia. We're still bringing in those winds from an east or northeasterly direction. Then the winds tilt into the south on the 21st. This brings up a very mild air mass from North Africa and southern parts of Europe. I wonder whether that would have had any Saharan dust with it. I'm not sure, but it's certainly, if you follow the isobars back, it's a very long fetch southerly, with the air originating down in North Africa, being caused by low pressure stalling out in the Atlantic. High pressure to the east of the country, warding that off. We move towards the final week of November 1968, and then we start to get a little bit more mobility coming in from off the Atlantic. So low pressure starting to head in during the final days, although again not with a great deal of conviction. And there we are on the 25th, for example, with low pressure looking like it's going to produce a proper west-southwesterly. But as we go through to the 28th, we see that southwesterly has actually failed, and this low pressure is starting to sink, beginning to sink with a jet stream down to our south, as blocking heights begin to rise up to the north. And that's how we finish up on the final day of November 1968, back in a blocking scenario, back with high pressure again sitting to our north between Norway there and Iceland and Greenland over there. The winds are once again back into an east or northeasterly direction. It's not particularly cold, so there's the upper air temperatures, generally quite mild really for the final day of November. But it's just the weather pattern that is very unusual and very abnormal for what you would typically expect, especially in this era when I'm doing the video. Very unusual for November. Probably not that unusual for the era. So the established weather patterns through the autumn of 1968 were quite unusual, but now it's time to move on into the winter itself. So this is how things are looking on the first day of December 1968. This is a cold month. It has a central temperature of 3.0, so quite a cold December indeed, with high pressure on the first day sitting to our northeast, bringing in this chilly southeasterly wind. The first 2 weeks of December 1968 were cold, dull, but often dry. It then becomes milder and more unsettled with heavy rain in most parts of the country, and then we get to Christmas. So let's just run you through the chart. So this is how things look on the 3rd of December 1968, with high pressure sitting to our east, low pressure out to west. We're bringing in this pretty chilly, pretty cold southeasterly type flow. That's the 4th, and then we go through to the 6th, and again, still got this duel going on between low pressure out in the Atlantic, high pressure blocking its route across central and eastern parts of Europe. The high pressure by the 8th is winning the battle, so the high pressure there is over Scandinavia, or southern Scandinavia anyway, and it's bringing in quite a cold, quite a chilly southeasterly wind. That's the 10th. It looks like the high pressure over Scandinavia is strengthening and beginning to back to a high pressure that's sitting across Russia. So the Siberian high is beginning to nose in as low pressure again in the Atlantic is being blocked. Very abnormal weather patterns once again, although nothing overly cold at this point. But we're probably talking about quite hard overnight frost, I would have thought. Nothing particularly snowy, but I would have thought we were talking about subdued temperatures and quite harsh overnight frost. That's the 12th again. We've got the low pressure trying to come in from off the Atlantic, but the high pressure is away to the east, keeping that low pressure at bay. That's the 14th, up to the middle of December, still with that high pressure to our east, still blocking the route. These areas of low pressure out in the Atlantic, pretty cold, east to southeasterly winds being brought in. But then on the 15th, a change. Low pressure finally starts to break through as the high pressure begins to collapse down into the southeast of Europe, down towards the Black Sea. So high pressure collapsing, low pressure starting to come in from off the Atlantic. Although, again, it's in an unusual position. This is the 17th of December very low pressure, but that low pressure is sinking a little bit to our southwest. The black line here is a jet stream. That's to our south, so we're on the cold side of the jet, and we're trying to raise heights across Greenland as well. That high pressure to the east has never really gone away. It's still there across Russia, just lurking there over the western part of Russia. So this low pressure sinks away as we go through to the 18th, the 19th of December, and that starts to pull the winds into a colder north to northeasterly once again. That colder plunge doesn't last long though. By the 20th, more low pressure is coming in off the Atlantic, bringing heavy outbreaks of rain. This is a very unsettled period, this third week of December. Very wet with frequent rain bands heading in off the Atlantic. That's the 22nd, and again, it's looking pretty wet and windy with this low pressure moving in from the Atlantic. There's the upper air temperatures looking nice and mild at this point, but in a couple of days' time, it's going to get a lot colder, and there's going to be a completely unforecast white Christmas. So that's the 23rd of December, the eve of Christmas Eve, takes that low pressure away to the northeast, and we pull down this colder northwesterly wind. This is the start of the surge of colder air pushing down across the country, completely unforecast. The upper air temperatures at midnight on the 23rd of December are still looking pretty mild, but we've got the -5 Celsius ice firm lurking there out to the north and to the west. And so that's the setup for midnight on Christmas Eve. It's a very interesting setup. What's going on there? It looks like it's going to be very mild. It looks like you're going to get a push of very mild air from the southwest. So we've got this low pressure to the east. We've also got low pressure out to the west. And then we've got the ridge there across Spain and Portugal. So you would look at that, and 9 times out of 10, you would assume what's going to happen is that these low pressures are going to push through, and you're going to bring up this long-fetched southwesterly wind ahead of those low pressures, and it's going to turn very mild, but also really wet. But what's actually happening is that the low pressure just here is fighting against cold air with this ridge that's sitting to our northwest. So we've got cold air pushing down across the country. We've got mild air trying to move up from the southwest. And in between, we've got a strung out weather front. So there's a weather front that's trailing through there. And of course, on the northern side of that weather front, you've got the cold air. On the southern side of that weather front, you've got that mild air trying to push up from the Canary Islands. So that's how the upper air temperatures are looking at midnight on Christmas Eve. You've got the -5 Celsius ice firm there through the northern part of the country, but down to the southwest, it is relatively mild. Now, as we go through to midnight on Christmas Day, look what's happened. That mild southwesterly flow has not made any inroads, really. The mild southwesterly flow is going into that direction, and the ridge to the northwest around Greenland and Iceland is actually strengthening and pushing the cold air further south. And then, of course, we've still got that weather front that's kind of like in that position. It's a little bit wrong. The weather front is kind of like in that position with an area of low pressure forming along it. Again, the cold air from that ridge of high pressure out to the northwest is feeding cold air into that weather front, and the mild air is no help really. The mild air is going down into that sort of direction. So this leads to an unforecast white Christmas. Trevor Hardy writes that some places had their first proper white Christmas since 1938. It's the first proper white Christmas for some parts of the country for 30 years. Where we know 1962 had widespread snow on Boxing Day, there wasn't much snow around on Christmas Day 1962 away from Scotland. So a lot of places had their first true white Christmas, snow falling for 30 years. What Trevor says is that parts of the Midlands, I know that North Hampshire, where I am, had a white Christmas from this. Parts of the Midlands from North East Wales to Buckinghamshire had a white and largely unforecast Christmas. As rain turned to wet snow on Christmas Eve, So some lucky people woke up to snow, example 10 centimetres of snow in Birmingham and 25 centimetres of snow out in more rural areas. It turned cooler on the 23rd, rain came in from the west and hit the cold air, leading to heavy snow overnight into Christmas morning, although Trevor does say that he didn't see any snow down there in Southampton. And then this leads on to a very cold Christmas to New Year week. So that's one of the classic white Christmases of the 20th century. There aren't that many of them. From the top of my head, there's only 1906, I think definitely 1938, 1968, probably 1956, 1970, and 1981, where snow didn't fall that much, but it was deep, crisp and even. Really not that many white Christmases during the 20th century, but this was one of the classics for Northern England, for Wales, and for me, as I say, where I am in North Hampshire, though I wasn't even born then, but I do know from talking to people that there was heavy snow overnight Christmas Eve into Christmas Day in 1968. There's the upper air temperatures for midnight on Christmas Day, 1968. -5 Celsius iceberg is pushing southwards as that cold air is undercutting. I mean, as I say, this leads us to a cold Christmas to New Year. So we have the high pressure then centering and strengthening out across Greenland and Iceland, with winds really turning into the north there on Boxing Day. That's pushing that cold air further southwards and bringing snow showers with it. Trevor Harding writes there was widespread snow between Christmas and New Year, and there was also a glaze. I didn't mention that. There was also pretty severe glaze of freezing rain on Christmas Eve across parts of Wales as well. Look at that. On the 27th of December, we have this big block across Greenland and Iceland with this real northerly being forced south. Now, you're going to see this recurring later in the winter, but a real hit of proper Arctic northerly winds there between Christmas and New Year. There's the upper air temperatures bringing that -10 Celsius iceberg down across the country on the 27th of December 1968. Bitterly cold, daytime temperatures below freezing all day, and no doubt a lot of heavy snow showers as well, maybe even more general outbreaks of snow for some places. 28th of December sees us again in this bitterly cold northerly wind with more snow showers in the north and east, and this cold weather continues running up towards the New Year. Again, we have this trough in the North Sea, which would have been feeding in heavy snow showers, maybe more general snow to eastern parts of the country, with a real classic blocking feature out to the northwest. There's the upper air temperatures still looking very cold. The -10 Celsius iceberg is down across the eastern side of the country. It goes on to the 30th. That low pressure there will probably have been producing a more general area of snow across southern and eastern parts of the country. All the time we're maintaining this really strong ridge, this block across Greenland and down into the North Atlantic. Finally, signs of a change on New Year's Eve as we begin to see this ridge just slipping out a little bit further southwards, starting to try and topple some less cold air around the top of the high pressure. And at this point, the emphasis switched around the New Year of 68-69. The emphasis switched from snow and frost and ice, switched to fog. There was a lot of fog during the New Year of 1968 to 1969. That's how New Year's Day looks, 1969, and we have high pressure sitting just to our west-southwest, and we bring around a milder airflow from the northwest. Of course, this is laid across snow-covered and frozen ground, so that's partly where the fog comes from, radiative fog, as that milder air, less cold Atlantic air runs over the top of the frost and the ice and the snow, and you generate quite dense fog over it. This goes on for quite a few days, actually, through the first week of January 1969, with high pressure sitting just out to our west, keeping the winds very light, nothing stirring up the atmosphere, but a milder or less cold feed of air coming around the top of the ridge from the Atlantic, producing more of that fog. A change on the 5th as the high pressure again tries to get itself back up to Greenland, and we drop this low pressure down across the country. Notice this recurring pattern of high pressure consistently trying to move up towards Greenland. How often do we see Greenland highs, true Greenland highs, with the yellow colours in over Greenland these days? Very, very rare occurrence. But this winter, regularly, the high pressure is trying to get itself up to Greenland, trying to force the winds into the north. That's the 7th of January 1969. This low pressure slinks southwards. Again, we've got the heights risen or rising across Greenland. And that again is trying to bring in colder air from the north. There's the upper air temperatures on the 7th of January showing many central northern parts of the country looking quite cold. A change on the 10th as low pressure then starts to head in from off the Atlantic, and then this dominates the rest of the month. So actually we have a little pause in the colder weather. This is generally quite a mild month. Trevor Harley writes that January 1969 is mild with a CET of 5.5. It was the mildest January of the 1960s, interestingly, occurring in the midst of this overall really very cold winter. It is the mildest January of the 1960s, and Trevor says that indeed to get one more mild you'd have to go back to 1944, or you have to go forward to 1974. Although 5.5 for the CET is nothing compared to what you get these days. We know that, of course, we get CETs for January in the 6s. Sometimes, occasionally, we'll get them in the 7s. I don't think we have a January CET in the 8s yet, but it's probably only a matter of time. And Trevor says that it turned mild and unsettled from the 7th and was very mild around the 21st. Although then it started to turn a bit colder towards the end of the month. So let's rattle through these charts. And there we go with the 12th. Again, low pressure is out to the southwest. It's interesting that this very mild, or it's not very mild, but this mild January isn't caused by an Azores high. There is no Azores high. And there is actually quite a lot of blocking with this month. So this is one of those occasions where you have, if you looked at the indexes, you would have a negative AO, Arctic Oscillation. You would also have a negative NAO, Arctic Oscillation. But it would still be a milder than average month. It's one of those rare situations where the indexes would be negative. You'd have lots of blocking, but the blocking is all on the wrong side of the Arctic to deliver anything particularly cold to us. So we're on the mild side of the blocking, if you like. This is plentiful blocking up here, but for us, we're on the mild side of that, with the cold air kind of like being forced down into that direction, and we're just bringing up these milder winds from the central part of the Atlantic Ocean, very unsettled with heavy rain very frequently across the country. That's the 18th. Look at that. We've got a Scandinavian high backing into Russia. Still quite a lot of blocking can be seen over here towards the Canadian side of the Arctic, and yet we remain generally on a mild, wet and windy note with low pressure heading in from off the Atlantic. It could very easily have been another cold month. January 1969 could very, very easily have been cold, but as it turns out, it was a mild month. There's the upper air temperatures for the 18th of January, and just a very mild scene, not just for the UK, but for most parts of Europe as well. And then that's how we go in towards the final week of January 1969. We're starting to raise the heights then to the south and to the east. We're not yet in a cold pattern, but you see low pressure is beginning to run out of puff. Low pressure is beginning to run out of steam out there in the middle of the Atlantic. And so we're losing those very deep areas of low pressure. Nowhere near as wet through this final week. We're getting to the end of the month now, and we're seeing that heights are rising through the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and towards Newfoundland, and starting to try and find its way back to Greenland again. So that's how we look on the final day of January 1969. Heights are rising through the central Atlantic. Got this deep low pressure to the north of the country, and we're trying to turn the winds into the north. There's the upper air temperature still looking generally mild, although cooler than compared to earlier in the month. A lot of cold air is lurking just to the north and to the northeast of the country, and that cold air is going to be heading our way through the course of February 1969, which is going to be a very wintry month indeed. Right, so we've talked for half an hour. I'm going to pause the video there, go and get myself a little drink to water my throat. Why don't you go and get yourself a cup of tea, maybe some Christmas chocolate biscuits, or maybe some Quality Street or Roses, whatever you fancy. And we'll meet back in around 2 minutes' time, and then we'll talk about the main event, which is the very cold February of 1969. So I'll see you in 2 minutes. Alright, so welcome back to the Christmas Day 2018 historic video at GazOffice.com. So we are looking at winter of 1968-1969. We've talked about the autumn of 1968. We've talked about the white Christmas and cold and snowy Christmas week of 1968 up to the new year of 1969. And then the mild January and wet January of 1969. But now we're up to the main event. The coldest part of the winter of 1968-1969 was February 1969. So let's resume and talk you through February 69. And this is a very cold month. It has a central temperature of just 1 degree CET. Very, very cold. Very cold February indeed. This is how we look on the first day of February 1969. We're raising heights out to the west. We're very much poised to start pulling colder air in from the north. That's how we go through to the second. Low pressure pushes across the country, taking heavy rain, and then we open the door to this much colder northerly wind start to flood down across the country from the Arctic, with the high pressure out there in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. So the 3rd of February 1969 sees us in a cold northerly wind, which brings snow showers to northern and eastern parts of the country. Not yet in a true blocking pattern, with the high pressure light centred out to west of the UK, so it's not northern blocking yet, but it certainly is the first push of cold northerly winds for this particular month. That's February the 4th, and the high pressure then is to west of the island, just starting to allow some slightly milder air to come round the top again from the Atlantic. And so this is a slightly milder period, and this is probably one of the reasons that, although this is a very cold February with a CET of 1.0, it's not a freezing month. It doesn't have a negative CET. Probably is these few milder days here that we have through the first week, or few less cold days that we have here through the first week, that allows, that stops us, if you like, from having a negative CET for this month. Now we're going through to the 6th of February, and we begin to pull this high pressure out to the northwest again, and now it's starting to head up towards Greenland. Look what's happening around here. We've got a polar low developing to the north of the country in this very cold and unstable northerly wind, and that is going to push southwards as we go through into the 7th. So this is the chart for the 7th of February 1969. This is a remarkable day. Trevor Harley writes that the 7th of February sets a low-level wind record of 135.8 miles per hour at Kirkwell, and that record stood until February 1986. Also, the 7th of February had a maximum temperature of just -7 at Estelmuir up in Scotland. A polar low caused a notable blizzard across the East Midlands and the southeastern part of England on the same day, as it introduced this very cold Arctic northerly winds. Snow started in the early afternoon through the Midlands and southeastern England and finished 6 hours later, depositing a foot of snow in some places. In Kent, there was 30 centimetres. with drifts going up to, I think that must be 20 feet drifts across parts of Kent. 20 feet drifts of snow. Polar air flooded southwards on this day, the 7th of February 1969, and so the temperature across southern England fell from 4 degrees Celsius, which is pretty chilly, 4 degrees at midday, to -3 by the middle and latter part of the afternoon, and then the temperature tumbled once the snow had cleared through, depositing that huge amount of snow across much of the Midlands and southern southeast England. Once that clears through, we see the temperature tumbling to -14 Celsius on the night of the 7th and the 8th of February 1969. So a really bitterly cold northerly wind flooding southwards across the country with that polar low. There's the upper air temperatures for midnight on the 7th of February 69. You see the -10 Celsius isotherm there to the north of Scotland. But look at that, on the 8th, we're in a true northerly. If you follow the isobars back, the air originates right from the top of the North Pole. It's a very unstable northerly as well, bringing no doubt heavy snow showers once that more general area of snow and blizzards had cleared through. Look at the upper air temperatures. The -10 Celsius isotherm is through the entire country there on the 8th of February 1969, and the -15 Celsius isotherm is into Scotland. The -20 Celsius isotherm isn't all that far from the northern Isles of Scotland. So this is extremely cold northerly wind, really very severely cold indeed. We keep these northerly winds going into the 9th of February 1969. Again, upper air temperatures are exceptionally cold. You'll be talking about daytime temperatures staying below freezing all day, and really hard overnight frost as well, with more snow in places too. That's a attempt just allowing this ridge to slip just a little bit further southwards again, trying to import some slightly less cold air around the top of it, but this time not really coming off. So the 11th through to the 12th sees this next low pressure plunging southwards across the country. That's bringing more snow to northern and eastern areas as we never infiltrate milder air, probably rain or freezing rain maybe in southern and southwestern parts of the country, as again this blocking feature of the high pressure in the Atlantic is beginning to push back up towards Greenland, and it's trying to become a block once again. So back to the 14th of February 69, and we're back into very block scenario with high pressure out to the north and west, low pressure to the south and east. Bitterly cold north to northeasterly winds are feeding in across the country, and Trevor Harley writes that there was more heavy snow on the 14th, on Valentine's Day of 1969. Low temperatures are also widespread across the north of Britain in particular. We get down to -20 at Penrith on the 16th of February, and -20.6 is recorded on the 18th of February at Grantown on Spey. Manchester had its lowest February reading of the century with -13 recorded there, and even in central parts of London, this middle phase of February 1969 sees the temperature going down to -7. So this low pressure just here, that's bringing more heavy snow on Valentine's Day of 1969, and that low pressure then slipping away to our south, still with a block maintained up to the north and east. Look at the upper air temperatures. They are still looking very, very cold, to say the least. That's the 16th. That's where you get those incredibly cold minimum temperatures down to -20 in some places overnight on the 16th of February 1969. With still this intense blocking out to the northwest, but also tying into blocking to our east as well, and still bringing in these bitterly cold easterly winds, which will be feeding in snow showers to eastern parts of the country. Now, we're just raising heights a little bit by the 18th, so the risk of snow is easing off, but of course we've got these exceptionally cold temperatures. We go down to -7, for example, in central London, -20 in rural northern parts of the country. But then low pressure starts to try to push up from the southwest. So now things start turning severe down in the southwestern part of the country. Trevor Harley writes that a severe easterly gale caused much damage to South Devon on this day, the 19th of December 1969. It led to widespread drifting snow across much of the south. There were blizzards across the west and across the Midlands from the 19th through to the 20th of December. And again, it's this low pressure down here that's trying to bring milder air up from the Atlantic, hitting that cold air, and this becomes a true blizzard across many parts of England and Wales. There's the upper air temperatures, really cold. Again, the minus 10 Celsius isotherm is in there across eastern parts of the country. So that's the 20th. That's bringing blizzard conditions and drifting snow to the Midlands, to Wales. We've already got a lot of snow on the ground from earlier snowfalls, of course, but more snow is piling up on top of it. This is a true channel low. So this month has everything. It has consistent blocking around Greenland. It's all supported by a Scandinavian Siberian high, which has been lurking over here. We haven't talked about it much, but it's been lurking throughout the month to our northeast. It's got northerly winds, it's got polar lows, it's got drifting, it's got blizzards, and now it's even got a channel low, classic channel low, down to the south around Biscay and into the English Channel, that's producing these gale force easterly winds and heavy drifting snow across much of England and Wales. There's the upper air temperature, see bitterly cold air, the battle lines well and truly drawn with a minus 5 Celsius isotherm through Wales and the Midlands, minus 10 Celsius isotherm further north. Down in the Channel, it might be turning mild enough for a little bit of rain down there, but through most parts, this is a classic channel low and blizzard. So 21st of February 1969, amount of low pressure is trying to move northwards, bringing more heavy snow. Minus 5 Celsius isotherm is moving just a little bit further north, so maybe in the south you're talking about rain, but from the Midlands northwards I think you would still be talking about heavy snow. That's the 22nd and that's the 24th, and you see what's happening is that actually the high pressure to the north and northeast is winning the battle here, so you're beginning to push this cold air into the country, and this low pressure that has tried to bring milder air is turning tail and moving back out into the Atlantic. And so as we close out this very cold February of 1969, it is the cold air that wins the battle. The high pressure over Scandinavia is taking over and it's bringing in those cold easterly winds across the whole country, and that's how we end the winter of 1968-1969, with high pressure up there over Scandinavia, back into Russia. Look at the easterly winds. If you follow the isobars back, it's a truly long fetch easterly with air originating from Russia, flooding in across the whole of northern Europe. Truly, truly blocked and cold for the end of winter of 1968-1969. So cold weather goes into March of 1969, and March 1969 has a central temperature of 3.3 degrees. It's a very cold month, and it's also a really dull month as well. There's going to be more heavy snow in the northern part of the country. There's going to be an ice storm as well, but we begin it with high pressure across the central parts of the country, maintaining those cold easterly winds, and those cold conditions are maintained through the first week. Not much snow, but you'll be talking about very frosty conditions under this ridge of high pressure that's extending back to the east. Now, this is the 7th of March, and we're trying to get that high pressure back up to Greenland again. We first saw the first hints of this in September of 1969. We got our first northerly shot in November of September 1968, I should say. The first hints of it were in September 1968. The first northerly shot was in November 1968, and here we are in March 1969, and we're still trying to get those heights back to the north towards Greenland once again. There's the upper air temperatures on the 10th of March 1969. The battle lines well and truly drawn for minus 10 Celsius iceberg through Scotland. Milder air is trying to come up from the south and the southwest. And so we're going to the middle part of the month, and as I say, Battle lines well and truly drawn from the 12th to the 14th of March 1969. There's heavy snow across northern parts of the country, a lot of blocked roads across Angus and Perthshire as these weather fronts battle against that cold air, producing heavy snow and blizzards in the northern part of the country. Now we go further on towards the middle part of the month. We can see a real battle is going on between this high pressure continuing to be blocking to the northeast, continuing to try and bring this bitterly cold air in from the east, and these milder winds trying to move in from off the Atlantic. That's where the battle lines are drawn. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, heavy snow up there. Further south, we're talking more about rain, but then we get a very nasty situation on the 16th through to the 18th. We get a freezing rain event, so an ice storm occurs through the Midlands and northern parts of the country from the 16th through to the 18th of March. A TV transmitter at Elmley Moor, Huddersfield, collapses under the weight of glazed ice on the 19th. So obviously there's going to be a weather front that's kind of like going to be strung out through the central part of the country. We've got milder air from the south, and we've got those bitterly cold easterly winds bringing that cold low-level air in from the east. That's the upper air temperatures. Remember, if you're within that yellow area, it can never snow, but if the dew points are below freezing, the rain will freeze and you'll get freezing rain, sheet ice and glaze. And this is exactly what happens here. A classic example of a freezing rain and glaze, sheet ice event through these days of the 16th, 17th and 18th of March 1969, with these easterly winds coming up against that those milder upper air temperatures that we have down to the south and to the southwest too. Through to the latter stages of March 1969, stays pretty cold. We have this ridge through the country, so that will maintain frost. Very delayed spring. You'd have more frost going on up to the end of the month. And it would just be pretty dismal, I think, through March 1969. I say it has a CT of only 3.3. It's a very cold March, really following on that very cold February, and pretty grim times, I would have thought. And even back to northerly winds through April of 1969. They just don't want to give up. But then finally, we get through to the 7th of April 69, and we start to bring up some milder winds from the southwest. It's a slightly cooler than average month overall, April 1969. There are northerly winds and snow showers in the first day or so, but then through the first week it turns mainly dry, sunny, and by the 7th, by this day, it's actually starting to become quite warm, with temperatures lifting up into the mid to upper teens Celsius. However, unsettled weather never really goes anywhere, and again we are seeing here signs of blocking around the 21st. We're trying to get the heights going again over Greenland and Scandinavia. That blocking just does not want to give up. But nothing particularly cold happening through April 1969, just a rather unsettled, quite cool and rather wet month. There we are on the 30th of April 69. Again, look, we've got blocking back around Greenland and Iceland and extending to the north of Scandinavia. We saw the first instance of that, I'll remind you, at the beginning of September 1968. May 1969 is an unsettled month. It's dull and wet and thundery. It was very wet across eastern parts of Scotland, and it was really quite thundery down in the south. There's many heavy downpours and notable thunderstorms, particularly in the final week. Hail 5 centimetres deep occurs in a storm at somewhere called Quinton in Buckinghamshire. I don't know if I pronounced that right. On the 16th, there were 27 millimetres of rain in 35 millimetres at Knotty on the 24th, and 60 millimetres fell in 2 hours near Crewe on the 30th. Edgbaston had 11 days of thunder in total this May. So just a really unsettled, wet and showery month with low pressure very often close to the country. That's how it looks at the end of May 1969. just very quick talk you through the summer, because after all this cold weather, the summer actually turns out to be pretty decent. June starts off a little bit cooler than average. It has a cool and wet start with low pressure not too far away from us, but it doesn't take long to start building this ridge through the country, and it turns a little bit drier and warmer for a time through the sort of second week of the month, although again low pressure comes back as we go through towards the 15th of June. So the 14th through to the 15th of June turns thundery. We get 59 millimetres of rain falling at Barnsley in 45 millimetres, accompanied by large hailstones as well. It was a very sunny month though, especially across England and Wales. Has a CET of 13.9, which is around or maybe even a little bit below average. But by the end of June 69, we're beginning to show signs of moving the Azores high into country. We're finally losing that blocking signal that we've had since 1968. The patterns begin to change a bit, starting to build up the Azores high, and so that takes us into a very nice month in July of 1969, with high pressure frequently dominating the weather. So July 1969 has a CET of 16.8. It's the warmest month of the decade of the 1960s. Can you believe that? A CET month of 16.8 is that's the warmest month that you get in the decades. Compare that to now, where we regularly have summer CET months in the 17s, sometimes in the 80s, and occasionally, such as this year, 2018, in the 19s. So this is the warmest month of the 1960s, and it does show you just how dismal the decade of the 1960s was for summers. There's high pressure sat right over top of the country on the 14th of July 1969, and this period sees temperatures lifting up to 32 degrees 90 Fahrenheit through this middle part of July 1969. This day, the 16th, actually gets a temperature to 32.8 degrees at Letchworth. And again, that is remarkable really for 1960, because there are very few days in the 1960s, very few summer days that got the temperatures into the 90s Fahrenheit. There's the 15 Celsius isotherm through England and Wales. That's quite a rare sight in the 1960s as well. And it's just a month that has a regular influence from the Azores high. So sometimes it's quite changeable out to the north and the west, but for England and Wales in particular, it just regularly has that Azores high ridging in, and that's the reason it's the best summer month of the 1960s, with regular high pressure close to the country, bringing up the air from the south. At the end of July 69, there was a thundery outbreak. This low pressure is a thundery area of low pressure, and that gives quite a wet end to what is actually a really decent summer month in July 1969. And then we go through to August finally, and again through the first days of August 1969, stays very warm. We maintain this area of high pressure to our northeast. This month has a CET of 16.4. It's a very warm, fairly sunny in the first half in particular, but there are some heavy thunderstorms in places due to the instability within the atmosphere. But nevertheless, this is another pretty decent summer month for the 1960s. This is the 9th of August 1969, with high pressure over Scandinavia, bringing up these very warm or even hot east to southeasterly winds. And this period sees temperatures up to 31 Celsius, that's close to 90 Fahrenheit, again around 88 Fahrenheit, 31 degrees Celsius, with really warm, hot-looking upper air temperatures there through the 10th, 11th and 12th. Then things start to turn more unsettled, so there's a thundery breakdown that begins to occur through the middle part of the month. 78 millimetres of rainfall at Lanark on the 16th, and there's 120 millimetres of rain at Thanet in Kent through the middle part of the month, and that's within 24 millimetres falling in 1 hour as well. As the air is wobbling, it's turning more unsettled into the second half of the month. We're beginning to go into cooler and more changeable pattern, although that's how we finish up on the 31st of August 1969 with the high pressure just out to the west of the country, and quite a nice end to the summer of 1969. Right, so we talked for nearly an hour, and I hope you found the video interesting and informative too. I've just got a couple of pictures to show you. There's not much from this winter. I did a Google search. I couldn't find a great deal, really, but we have got a couple. This one is from February 1969. It's Liverpool, I think, at Anfield, Liverpool Football Club, and they're playing there on a snow-covered and frozen pitch. This, I found this on Google. This is Dennis Jackson. This picture is from Dennis Jackson. Big thank you to Dennis Jackson for putting this online. I'm not sure if Dennis is depicted within the picture. It looks like a couple of kids are having a really good time in the snow, having a snowball fight, probably either from Christmas 68 or from February 1969. And then this is Hampstead Heath, sledging on Hampstead Heath in February 1969, and there's plenty of snow there for those kids to be sledging on. And that really is it. So that's the end of this Christmas Day historic weather video. I hope you found it interesting and informative. I hope I did it justice. Hope you was looking forward to it, and it was everything that you wanted it to be. So just say a big thank you again to all of you for tuning in on this Christmas Day. I say I'm always blown away by people wanting to share their Christmas Day with us. So big thank you to all of you for doing that. I know a lot of people will not be watching this on Christmas Day, but will want to catch up with it later. So this video will be placed either later today or more likely tomorrow. It'll be placed within the historic section at Gazovitz. You'll be able to come back and watch it on demand whenever you would like to do that. And tomorrow, Boxing Day, we'll get a regular week to 10-day video update back up. So I wouldn't say things are back to normal tomorrow on Boxing Day. We're not going to have the 5-day forecast, but we will have a video update. But I'll bring you up to date with all of the latest weather developments. So that'll be with you tomorrow. Please enjoy the rest of your Christmas Day. I hope you have a lovely time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Christmas Day. Hope it's everything that you wanted it to be. And at 1 hour... thanks so much for tuning in on your Christmas Day. And that's it. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of Christmas.